Thanks for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Today's guest, Jasraj Singh Hallan, is the Member of Parliament for Calgary Forest Lawn and has been recently appointed by Opposition Leader Pierre Poilievre as the Shadow Finance Minister. Jas, welcome and congratulations to your new role.
Hey, thanks so much, Tony, and thanks for having me on your show today.
For sure, my pleasure. I guess we'll start with the obvious question. What are your priorities in this new role that you have?
Well, the priorities that are top of mind are, number one is tackling just inflation. The same just inflation that has made the price of everything go up, whether we look at groceries, whether we look at gas, whether we look at home heating today. All of the increase in prices have been caused by just inflation. Justin Trudeau has borrowed and spent on the backs of hardworking Canadians and without any restraint whatsoever. So he needs to rein in his spending and make sure that we're not borrowing on further generations of Canadians. So that's our number one priority. We want to get rid of the carbon tax and any other tax increases that Justin Trudeau keeps trying to put on the backs of Canadians.
Yeah, and of course, your role, it's obviously a high-profile role, so you're interacting with Prime Minister Trudeau, but also with Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland. So how do you keep her accountable as well?
Absolutely. Look, first of all, I'm absolutely honored that Pierre Poilievre would put such a big responsibility on my shoulders. Obviously, you know I have huge shoes to fill. But in talking with Pierre, what I'm going to be bringing to the table is my own experience. Someone who's came here from Dubai, moved here when I was 5, into the riding I get to represent today. And Pierre and myself both come from humble beginnings where we grew up with not very much or very, very little. I had 2 hardworking parents who worked, 2 jobs sometimes at a time, and literally with the sweat of their brow helped us, to live the Canadian dream today. But under Justin Trudeau and the finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, less and less people want to come to Canada or can come to Canada because of the broken immigration system. But many can't survive. They can't realize that Canadian dream that myself and Pierre got to realize because that opportunity in Canada has decreased so much. So when we look at the difference between the Liberal benches and given the Prime Minister and is, someone who's been spoon-fed that has a silver spoon in his mouth, compared to our team who's coming with real experience. That's what we're going to be coming to with the table, to be the voice for Canadians who just want to realize the Canadian dream, that want to have a safe and affordable future for their kids so that they can survive and they can help contribute to Canada. And again, with these disastrous policies, with this unreined spending that Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland have done, less and less Canadians are able to survive today, and more Canadians are being pushed to food banks and to homeless shelters that are up 30% in this country. We see the pricing of food go up. We also see home heating. That's going to go up 50 to 100%. This is all because of a few things. Just inflation by the borrowing, and this Liberal government who has continued to attack our responsible Canadian energy sector. This ideology of leaving it in the ground has left billions of dollars of investment in the ground. And today what we see is people's home heating bills up 50 to 100%. And that's because they should have supported that energy industry in the first place.
Yeah, you raise a few really important points. Obviously, the counter narrative from the Liberal government is, "Oh, there's inflation everywhere." How do you answer that?
Well, it's simple. If you don't believe us, it's just inflation. Look at the potential Liberal leader candidate, Mark Carney, who used to be the Bank of Canada's governor. He said inflation in Canada is a domestic story. And let's look one step further. The Bank of Canada governor has come out and said that inflation in Canada today is homegrown. So Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland can blame others as they do always and say it's everyone else's problem. But this is the same government before the pandemic had borrowed $100 billion, during the pandemic spent almost $500 billion, $200 billion of which wasn't even COVID related. So how can anyone trust or believe a Liberal government that has continued to borrow on the backs of Canadians to say that this is someone else's problem. This is the typical Liberal talking point.
Right.
It's always someone else's problem. And the more Justin Trudeau's policies fail, the more expensive it gets for Canadians.
We're going to take a brief break here. We'll be right back with our guest. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Jasraj Singh Hallan. He is the Member of Parliament in Calgary Forest Lawn, but importantly for our show, he's the Shadow Finance Minister. Jazz, one of the things that has been really interesting the last little while, it has been a little bit of change of focus by the Federal Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who all of a sudden has sounded really alarmed at the economic picture, whereas before she wasn't. Is she trying to pave the way because she knows a recession is coming, or what do you think is behind that?
The finance minister would have people believe that she had an epiphany. She woke up and all of a sudden she's going to start thinking about Canada's fiscal position. But their track record said otherwise. The amount of borrowing that they've done, that $500 billion of borrowing that they did over the pandemic, which again, $200 billion went to non-COVID related places. The same government that paid $54 million for a useless app that they don't even know where that money came from or where it went to when they were paying people. The same app that was supposed to cost $80,000 and someone could build over a weekend. This is the kind of reckless spending that has Canada to where it is today. How can someone believe that the same government that has put us in this position is now suddenly starting to think about it? This is like saying that the arsonist will put out the fire that they created in the first place.
Yeah, and do you again, we had another rate hike today. The Bank of Canada rate went up by 0.5 point. So again, what's your reaction to that, and what does that tell about the future of the economy?
Well, it goes to show again that the Bank of Canada's interest rates are a reaction to something. But what is that reaction to? It's a reaction to just inflation. And the Bank of Canada's rate has increased, I believe, in the last 6 months from 0.25 all the way up to 3.75 today. And this is only because it's a reactionary thing to the debt that Canada has. They are reacting to something, and that something again is just inflation. And it's easy for Justin Trudeau to blame others for this and say it's a global phenomenon that he keeps continually saying, but this is all in his hands. He's caused Canadians to be put in the position they are today. There are many that we probably haven't seen that will be missing their mortgage payments, and we may not fully see the reaction to this interest rate hike for another year, the real consequences of it. And the Bank of Canada was very clear today that this is a rate increase of 50 base points that will most likely see more in December at the minimum. And this is just to show that if Justin Trudeau has said it that he does not think about monetary policy, he needs to rein in his spending, because then that will help decrease the Bank of Canada's interest rates. You mentioned that maybe the finance minister had an epiphany. I don't think anything that they've done since Pierre Poilievre has taken over has been an epiphany at all. I think it's been peer pressure, that since he's taken over, they've all of a sudden pretended that they've seen the light. They've seen the Conservative leaders' new light, that they're going to fix the problems that they created. But I will tell you, no one believes them.
Yeah, and we've got just about a minute and a half before the next break, Jazz, but we've talked about the impact of these rate hikes, the Bank of Canada rate, and you just talked about inflation as well. What are you hearing from your constituents about the cost of living crisis and how it affects them?
Well, it's important to understand that even before COVID, as soon as, we saw this as soon as when I was elected in 2019, I came from the construction industry. And what we were seeing was, because of all the canceled projects by this, ideologue Liberal government, I was seeing many of the tradespeople that I was dealing with having to lay off their entire workforce and having to go back and work in the field themselves again, because they just could not afford to hire people or keep costs low if they didn't go back onto the field themselves. This has been a problem even before COVID. And my constituents were already emailing me and getting in touch with me, telling me how the carbon tax was already too high for them. I remember going to a door of a single Lebanese mom who had a for sale sign on her lawn. And she said while I was door knocking in that election, what is this carbon tax? What did I do wrong in the last however many years that I wasn't doing before that, where I'm being punished by this thing called a carbon tax? I'm not using any more heat than I was before. So this Liberal government was already attacking not just my constituents, but Canadians with this carbon tax that did not help solve any problems. It didn't reduce the emissions that they said it would.
And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Jasraj Singh Hallan. He is the Shadow Finance Minister in Parliament. Jas, you've talked a lot in this interview about the tax burden that average Canadians have and are bearing right now. How can Canada get its taxes under control?
The first thing they can do is cancel the carbon tax. Again, like I said, it hasn't lowered emissions. It's made Canada or Canadians suffer even further. It has not done anything to improve the environment. And this tripling of the carbon tax will put Canadians further and further into debt. That's the first thing we can do for Canadians is cancel this job-killing carbon tax. The second thing we can do is the government also wants to do a tax hike on people's payrolls. So the money that people take home after January the 1st, it will be less than it was before. And this is another thing that our party has been calling for, our leader, Pierre Poilievre, has been calling for, is cancel any tax hikes going forward. Our party put forward a motion weeks ago, and we put it together and said the government should promise that there will be no new tax hikes on Canadians, because people are taking home less now because of just inflation and because of the cost of the carbon tax. So it was too bad and it was unfortunate that the costly coalition of the Liberals and the NDP teamed up together to vote that motion down. We put another motion in front of the Parliament after that, and that was to say no more carbon tax price increases. Again, that costly coalition does not work for Canadians. They voted against it, making the cost of heating your home, driving to work, driving your kids to school more expensive, and the cost of groceries as well.
Indeed. The flip side of this discussion, obviously, we've been talking about taxation and government spending, but you're being a shadow finance minister, you also have to be concerned with the growth agenda for Canada. What will bring Canada out of its doldrums, create dynamic growth? That means more jobs, more opportunity, et cetera. Have you given any thought to that yet?
Absolutely. Look, I'm from Alberta. We have the most responsible, the most clean energy that can provide not just Canada, but the world with real responsible energy. What we need to do is, as a small business owner, you raise a really good point. As a small business owner, sometimes we will look at tackling the debt, but we have to look at how can we make more money? How can we make sure that our investment in Canada is growing? And one way to do that is get rid of this nonsensical bill C-69, which is a no new pipeline bill. Get rid of the tanker ban that with bill C-48. Get rid of the job killing carbon tax. We need to make sure our energy sector and our agriculture isn't continually being attacked like this Liberal government has been doing. We need to make sure that the red tape and burden is out of the way, so more investment comes into Canada, that we can provide the world with energy. That's how we're going to get more investment to come into Canada. That's how we're going to be able to balance our budget and make sure that we have good jobs in Canada. And we can definitely replace dirty dictator oil the same way. This will benefit the world and not just Canada. That is our plan. That's what we will do when we form government.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point. Perhaps a lot of people are not aware of this, but we do get oil from some sources that really should make us embarrassed when we've got so much oil largesse in this country. Maybe talk a little bit about that and what Pierre Poilievre has said about that.
Absolutely. So Canada today imports about 130,000 barrels of oil from outside of Canada. A great way to replace that, let's build those pipelines. Let's get this Liberal government out of the way. Let's build those pipelines so we can lower our costs, we can create good jobs, and get our clean energy out there. Recently, the German Chancellor came to Canada and was literally saying, "We need your energy. Give us your energy." And Justin Trudeau's response was, "Build us a business case and we'll look forward." So this just proves that when we could help our allies around the world replace, dirty dictator oil, especially from places like Russia, Justin Trudeau says one thing, but his actions prove another. Canada today could have been a world leader in replacing that oil. It was 7 years of bad decisions and canceled projects. I must remind everyone that when Justin Trudeau took over, there were 15 good LNG projects on his table once he became prime minister. Not a single one of those were approved. They all got canceled. And there's been billions and billions of dollars of investment that got left in the ground because of his ideology. And right now, Canada, again, when we see what's happening in Ukraine, we could have been the world leader to replace that dirty dictator oil for our European allies. But Justin Trudeau's ideologies have stopped that from happening.
Right. My guest today is Jasraj Singh Hallan. He is the MP for Calgary Forest Lawn, but also the shadow finance minister on Parliament Hill. Jas, looks like, give us a little bit of a sense from your perspective, but whenever we faced an issue in this country, a national issue that Justin Trudeau has reacted to, it always seems to be spending more money is his go-to response. So tell us your perspective on that and what that means. And we've talked about this a little bit, what that means for future generations if that continues.
Absolutely. Look, I can compare this to the time that Stephen Harper was prime minister. I was in the construction industry at that time, and about 2008, when we saw, signs of recession happening, Prime Minister Stephen Harper did the right thing and showed some leadership. He got together with the other parties, and they made sure that we didn't feel that recession that bad. And around 2009, we in the industry started seeing a comeback. We saw it. We saw that there was fiscal restraint and true leadership at that time. And since Justin Trudeau has taken over in 2015, we have not seen a real recovery happen in this country because of failed leadership. And that failed leadership that continues, Justin Trudeau continues to spend, print more money and spend. Our future generations will have to keep on paying for Justin Trudeau's failed policies of today. These last 7 years, Justin Trudeau has borrowed more money in his term than all prime ministers before him combined. And that is going to be on the heads of, we may not see that in our generation, but the future generations will have to continue to pay that debt down because of his reckless spending and due to his ideology. He's not letting the country grow with investment. And at the same time, he's putting people further and further into debt. We haven't seen numbers like this, like just inflation. And since the last time we had a prime minister that had the same last name as him, that was his father.
Indeed. I remember those days too. I do, since you are an Alberta-based MP, I do have to ask, obviously there's been a change of leadership in the province of Alberta with Danielle Smith taking over as a premier. A lot of what she's been talking about is lack of listening in Ottawa from the Trudeau government that really kind of powered her campaign forward. So give us your perspective as an Alberta MP on this.
Well, I will say that we're always happy to see when we have an ally fighting for Canadians and Albertans, one that will stand up to Justin Trudeau and not fold to him. This is what we're going to do, is that we're going to move forward and raise those concerns with him. We all have the same goal. Let's get our energy sector booming again. I come from a province that is very rich in agriculture and our energy industry. And on top of that, Alberta has been doing a good job that we've seen in our tech industry. We've seen more investment coming into Alberta than we've seen in many, many years. And that's due to the work that former jobs minister Doug Schweitzer I saw put in. I was with him for a few of the acquisitions that took place. Not acquisitions, but people that wanting to come to Alberta to have their headquarters there. One company, as an example, was mCloud. mCloud. I helped make a introduction to the jobs minister. And look, they moved their headquarters there. Jobs got created. And this is the kind of leadership that we need to continue to see. We also don't have, like you've mentioned this, that we have a Liberal government that is just not listening. They're not consulting. And what's the reaction of that? What's the end story of that? We see failed government services such as passports because they're not listening to people. The airports are a complete mess. Our immigration system is broken. And when we talk to those professionals that are in those fields, they continually say that the government has stopped consulting. They are not listening to anyone anymore. So if they're not listening to the professionals, what do you think that they're going to be doing to everyday Canadians who have to suffer because of the consequences of bad policies by Justin Trudeau? At the end of the day, Canadians are suffering. They can't get passports. They can't get immigration done on time. It's bad for everybody under this Liberal government, and it's because they're not listening.
Jas, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. Obviously, you've got a lot of effort you've got to put into your new portfolio, Shadow Finance Minister, and certainly we wish you every success in these endeavors.
Thank you so much, Tony. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Many thanks to Jasraj Singh Hallan, the MP for Calgary Forest Lawn and Shadow Finance Minister in the opposition, for coming on the program here. Really, he got a good insight. He's just new to the job, just a couple of weeks old into this new portfolio. Obviously, he's got a lot on his plate, but he is also taking the bull by the horns. He's got a lot of concerns he's got to express on behalf of Canadians to the powers that be in Ottawa, and we wish him every success. Thanks for watching today.